Asura Breaker is the best class in the game, hands down, right now. Now, some of you guys might not agree with me. Some of you guys might be like, oh, well, Deathblade does more damage. It's at a higher damage ceiling, right? Surge Deathblade. Or Knight's Edge Soul Eater is just better overall in terms of average DPS for most players. Well, the thing is, for me, when I'm thinking about the best class in the game, I think about a class that does pretty much everything extremely well. And those things that they do extremely well, for the most part, are better than most of the classes in the game. So they might not be number one damage, right? Might not be number one damage ceiling, might not have the most consistent DPS compared to like a Knight's Edge Soul Eater, but other than those two aspects, pretty much it does everything better than any other class in the game. And I'm going to talk about that today, and we're going to hop into game to show you all that. So when talking about the Breaker strengths, I want to separate these into 5 areas where I think Breaker excels at. So the first area is mobility. Second area is survivability. Third is utility. Fourth is burst. And fifth is stat scale. Now, the first area is mobility. And Breaker, while it is a class that you kind of want to be stationary and tank the boss, this class does not lack in mobility at all. If you look at the class itself, right, you're going to be standing, your playstyle generally is standing in front of the boss and punching it like this. This is what you want to be doing as much as you can, as often as you can. But even though this is a very stationary class, you have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 mobility skills. So while you are a class that is not a swiftness class, and you're a class that has a very stationary playstyle, if you want to bob and weave and dodge the boss's attacks, you have 4 skills that can do that for you. And on top of that, you can even count like maybe even this skill, right? It takes you a little step forward. This skill, which also takes you a little bit step forward. You have basically 4 main mobility skills and 2 other skills that also move you. This class is extremely mobile compared to most other classes in the game, and really doesn't get beat out by most classes, maybe other than like War Dance or FI War Dance, or maybe like Reaper or something like that. Other than those classes, this class has extremely high level of mobility, and it will allow you to place yourself across the map whenever you want, as quickly as you want, and be putting yourself in an advantageous situation. Now, that's mobility. Number 2 is survivability. Now, we all know one of the strongest skills in the game has to be the damage reduction that we get from our support. So like Rhapsody, Godsent Law, Starry Night, those skills are some of the strongest skills in the game, because when your DPS or character is on the ground and unable to dodge a boss attack or something like that, your support will drop a field on top of you that will reduce the incoming damage and also give you a little bit of shield. Well, unlike any other class in the game, Breaker, Asura Breaker, has that ability built into the class itself. As you can see here, it says press X to activate Defensive Speculation. When Defensive Speculation is used, gain push immunity for 2 seconds, so it gets push immunity, so you don't get knocked up, and you get a 40% shield, 40% of your max health, and it also blocks incoming damage by 20%, so reduces incoming damage by 20%. That is actually insane, because this is basically that support defensive buff that you get by yourself. You don't have to rely on another character for it. You can do it whenever you want. You don't need to have a support look at you. Now, on top of this as well, if you really wanted to go all the way, you can pop this and have a support drop that defensive buff on you as well, and you are basically unkillable at that point. It's actually quite insane that this class gets the ability to throw out a shield like this every 10 seconds without any animation. So you can do it while you're in the middle of attack. You could do it while you're in the middle of your awakening, in the middle of your punch flurries, right? Just do this, press X, and you get it. It is actually insane that you get this ability on this character that makes it so that you can pretty much be the most survivable and tanky class in the game. Maybe just outside of like Gunlancer, for example. You can really take advantage of this and tank a lot of hits, and also take advantage of the fact that in bosses that give you like meter, like a Khan or like Clown or things like that, you can use this to make it so that you get less meter from their attacks and further enhance your ability to face tank attacks and keep your DPS uptime high. This is something no other class has, and this is the only class that really has this ability. Now, the third area I want to talk about is utility, and this class has utility in spades. While it doesn't really have a great synergy, it only has the incoming damage synergy, it has utility in spades in other areas. If you think about it this way, destruction and stagger are areas that other classes, many other classes lack, especially your biggest DPS classes, your strongest classes. I would say most of them have pretty abysmal ability to do mechs in terms of stagger and destruction. Well, Breaker does not suffer with that problem at all. As you can see here, we have mid to high stagger, level 2 weak point max stagger, level 2 weak point high stagger, mid to high stagger with 1 weak point. We have another low stagger skill with 1 weak point, low stagger skill here, and another low stagger skill here. Look at this. 5 of your skills either have mid to high or max stagger, and also you have an access to multiple weak point skills, with some being even level 2 weak point as well. This is actually insane, right? The only other class that really has this is, of course, like Gunlancer, or maybe it's like Scrapper, or like Slayer. There's not many other classes in the game that have this level of stagger and destruction that Breaker has, and on top of that, they're also really, really strong. They're not a class that's like Gunlancer, that's just like a kind of like a pseudo support class. No, they do crazy damage, have insane stagger, and have insane destruction as well. And on top of that, they have 2 counters. 1 counter here with Greater Strike, and 1 counter here with Haymaker. They have 2 counters, they have 5 stagger skills, multiple level 2 weak points, and also, you can also have a parry. You throw up the skill, and if you have the gassed up tripod, it basically turns into a parry. You reduce the amount of damage that you take, as you can see here, during this game push immunity, incoming damage minus 50%. You gain a parry attack as well. So I've talked about this before in the past, but I think in the past, Glaiver was kind of like the most well-rounded class. This basically has every single thing a Glaiver has, except it also does a lot more damage. This class is actually insane. And then we have the Burst. One of the things that people complain about for Gunslinger is not just that it does little damage. I actually don't think that Gunslinger lacks in damage much. I think it's about a mid-tier to above middle tier damage in terms of where it sits on the tier list, right? But the problem with Gunslinger, and I think the main reason why a lot of people complain about the class and want it to be reworked, is because the fact that it has an insanely long window for damage. You don't have a burst window like a lot of other classes. It takes you 18 seconds pretty much to get out all of your damage. Whereas for Breaker, you can get all your damage out in under the time that it takes for an attribute to expire. This class actually has an insane burst window, and because of that, it is very flexible in a lot of fights. Whenever you have a stagger check, when you have a boss being knocked down, anything like that, you can pretty much use that window and get out your entire flurry of punches. So this class, on top of having high mobility, high survivability, high utility, it also has insane burst and insane damage. And the last piece that is kind of like the cherry on the top for this class really has to do with its stat scaling. Now, as we all know, most of the strongest DPS classes in the game in the history of Lost Ark have always been spec classes. Now, part of it is because of the fact that they're all burst classes, but the other part of that is because of the way the spec stat works. No other stat outside of the spec stat gives you a direct increase to your damage. So if you look at here, right, spec, when in Brawl King stance, increases the shock skill damage. increases the stamina skill damage, increases the awakening skill damage. This is basically the same concept for every single spec class in the game. The more spec you have, the more damage that class does. And this is not something that is present in crit, it's not present in domination, swiftness, endurance, expertise. This is not present in any of these other stats other than spec. Now you could say, like, I think like domination or something is like damage from status ailments or staggered or like that, right? But that's only a very set small window. Like, no other stat gives you an increase to your damage throughout an entire fight like spec does. And that's why spec in the past has always been the strongest stat in the game, and in general spec classes were the strongest classes in the game as well. But crit for Sura now basically acts as spec, because our Z skill, which is our main damage skill, scales completely off of the crit rate that the class has. So the higher the crit stat you have, the higher the crit rate you have, the more damage that you do. Now, the one difference is that there is a cap for this, right? If you hit 100% crit, you're capped, while spec doesn't really have that cap. But for the most part, you're not really going to be hitting that in this game, because there are ways to kind of change it, right? You can make so you have lower levels of adrenaline, more in your damage engravings. Instead of running masters and elixir, you run crit elixir. There's a lot of ways to make it so that you don't have to hit that crit ceiling and make up for that damage in other ways. So the Asura Breaker is the only class that makes it so that you have crit as your scaling factor. But on top of that, right, spec classes always struggled with one thing, and that was consistency of their damage, because they always lacked crit. So pretty much any time you're running with a spec class, their favorite synergy is a crit synergy, because it helps them be more consistent with their damage. But even with the crit synergy, it's not like their crit is basically 100%. They're still probably hovering around 70% crit or something like that, 70%, 80%. But here is where the Sura wins over that. Because you are a crit main class, you don't have to worry about your crit chance. Because as you can see here, I have 100% crit now with my adrenaline stacks to max. So when I'm building a party around me, I don't even need to worry about a crit synergy. Where these other spec classes are worrying about their crit rate and how consistent their damage is, Sura Breaker doesn't have to worry about that consistency. Their damage is completely consistent because they are pretty much at 100% crit all the time. And on top of that, when you're putting a crit rate synergy in your party, you're actually taking away a damage synergy. Sura Breaker does not have to worry about that. They can have a Gunlancer synergy. They can have a Glavier synergy. They could have a Deathblade synergy. Those are all damage synergies that they can bring into their party and further increase their damage, where other spec classes are unable to think about that and unable to do that. They have to have those crit synergies in their party to make sure they're doing maximum damage potential. So that is why the crit scaling that the Asura Breaker has is the most broken scaling in the game right now. You could say that, you know, with Wind Fury Aeromancer, they also have like swiftness scaling. They get like crit chance and crit damage base, all that, but they still need a crit. They still need a crit synergy for their highest ceiling builds. Whereas with the Asura Breaker, you just don't. So this class has everything. It has mobility. It has survivability. It has utility. It has damage and burst. And the way the class works with its crit scaling makes it extremely, extremely strong, and also extremely, extremely consistent in its damage as well. And all these things combined, in my opinion, make the Asura Breaker the most broken class in the game at the moment. It's not just because it does a ton of damage. It's not just because it's the newest kid on the block. It literally has everything that you want in a class. And in many ways, when I play this class, I feel like I am breaking the rules because of how tanky it is, how strong it is, how like mobile it is. It just has everything. So guys, if you have not tried out the Asura Breaker before, I would highly recommend all y'all try it out, because it is legit one of the funnest classes in the game, and also I think, again, it is the best class in the game right now. So that's about it for this video. Let me know down in the comment section below, what do you guys think? Do you agree with me and think that the Sura Breaker is the most broken class in the game right now, the best class in the game right now? Let me know down in the comment section below if you agree or not. And as always, remember, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, hit the sub button, ring the bell for notifications, and also I stream every single night on twitch.tv/MisoXShiru starting at 10 p.m. PST. So hopefully I see you guys on my stream, but if not, hopefully I'll see y'all on the next video. Alright guys, peace out.